It's a human issue because when funds are stolen, the people that actually need help don't get it. This includes people with disabilities, families in need, and foster kids who depend on these programs to survive. Meanwhile, these people are getting $1 million a day off it.
And what's sad is they don't care that they're hurting you or that they're hurting anybody else. They don't care.
Welcome to the Wheel With It podcast with your host, Devin. Let's get into the episode.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Wheel With It. I'm your host, Devin Readers, and today is a really special episode for us. We're incredibly honored that this little engine that could in podcasting gets to welcome David Hoch, the whistleblower who helped uncover the Minnesota welfare fraud scandal you've no doubt heard about on the news. This is something I've been following very closely, not just as a podcaster, but personally, because I rely on the same types of services that were being defrauded. So yes, I'm biased. I love this guy. I consider him an American hero. We don't usually get into politics around here, but to me this isn't a political issue, it's a human issue, because when funds are stolen, the people that actually need help don't get it. This includes people with disabilities, families in need, and foster kids who depend on these programs to survive. Before we jump in, I want to explain two terms that come up in the conversation: the asset limit and the marriage penalty. The asset limit means that if you're single, you can't have more than $2,000 in assets, or $3,000 if you're married, without risking your benefits. That number has not been updated since 1989. The marriage penalty is exactly what it sounds like. Getting married can reduce or eliminate your benefits altogether. We're advocating to update the asset limits and eliminate the marriage penalty. If you want to learn more or get involved, you can visit welfarereformnow.com or realwithit.com/reform. Again, that's realwithit.com/reform. And now, with that, let's get into the conversation with David Hoch. I think you're really going to like this interview. Enjoy. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Wheel With It. And today we are honored, absolutely honored to have this guy, David Hoch, the Minnesota whistleblower that uncovered the fraud scandal in Minnesota that you've no doubt been hearing about on the news. David, how are you? I cannot believe you're on here.
I'm doing very well. It's cold outside, but I generate enough heat with what I do that I warm everybody up.
Yes, you've been very spicy lately. Perfect for this winter storm. So tell us about yourself, as if we need an introduction, and then we'll go from there.
I was born in Minneapolis, number 9 of 11 children, and grew up in Minneapolis. I went to Annunciation Grade School. I graduated from Washburn High School in Minneapolis, and I graduated from the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. And I have worked professionally since that time here in the Twin Cities, and know this city and the people and the vibe that goes on here. And when something is really odd and it doesn't fit where you grew up, it sticks out and you go, why is this happening? And why is it happening here? So I just decided to dive into this several years ago because I knew that something wasn't right. And I didn't want to sit around and say, that's terrible, somebody should do something about it. I decided to be that someone to do something about it.
So how did you uncover all this, and what made you decide enough's enough, I'm gonna blow the whistle, so to speak?
So then I saw all these childcare facilities opening up, and I drive around and I go, I mean, there are like 4 of them within 3 blocks. But it was really odd because they weren't childcare like New Horizon or KinderCare, where they've got these facilities, they're dedicated to children, they've got a play area outside. These facilities were all in industrial buildings, commercial buildings. They were in bad neighborhoods. There was no play area for the kids. And I said, what is going on here? And then I started to notice that when the snow would fall, I'd drive by and there were no footprints in the snow, no tire tracks in the parking lot. And the sign would say they're open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Some said open 24 hours. I said, who has a childcare that's open 24 hours? I've never heard of that before. And so it piqued my interest, and I started to keep track of when I went by these facilities and what I saw. And I said this, and then I started to see these vans driving around, and there's always a Somali driver and never a passenger, ever, not one time. And I said, what is going on here? And then I started to see these adult daycare centers open up, and then the autism centers. And I said, this doesn't fit. And it sticks out so bad that I had to go into it. And as I started to investigate and research this fraud, it had tentacles going everywhere. And I realized it was so massive that I couldn't possibly take this whole thing on. I couldn't wrap my arms around it. So I said, okay, I've got to be methodical about this. I've got to be systematic. And so I said, what area am I going to focus on? And it was the childcare, because it was so brazen. Words misspelled on signs, hours when nobody's there. Crazy.
How did you find Nick?
So before I found Nick, what really set this in hyperdrive for me is I was sitting at a stoplight and I looked over and I saw a sign that says Quality Learning Center. I said, no, I'm reading it wrong. It's Quality Learning Center. And I looked back and I'm staring at that sign. I said, no, it says Leering. I said, the sign's misspelled. And then not only that, but they're at 1411 Nicollet Avenue, Minneapolis. They misspelled the word Nicollet.
Yes, I heard that. I'm like, oh my God, these people are so brazen that they misspelled a street. Crazy.
So supposedly the state of Minnesota has been conducting annual inspections there. If you're coming from the state of Minnesota and the sign is misspelled, aren't you going to say, hey, you might want to fix the sign because it's spelled, oh no, by the way, the address is misspelled too. Oh, by the way, you're licensed for 99 children and you have no children. And Department of Human Services, which is core to this fraud, they're the ones who've been writing the checks for this. So you can blame the Somalis, you can blame anybody else, but it really comes back to the heart of this, which is the people who are writing the checks and they're funding all this fraud. I mean, you get with the Somalis, if you're going to keep giving them money, they're going to keep doing it. So you got to stop the source, which is what I told Secretary Bessent. You're chasing money wires and SARS, which are suspicious activity reports that banks are supposed to report. You're over there in Saudi Arabia and Kenya and wherever else in God's name trying to track these wires and stop it. I said, you're letting the tail wag the dog, right? You're chasing, go back here to the head of the dog and stop the payments. Don't sit out here, wait. To me, it was maddening. Stop the source of the funding. And so that's what the government has started to do and now they're looking closely. And I'm finding out that this was more widespread across the country than even I had imagined. It's everywhere.
So tell us about that. Tell us about how you think the fraud started, how widespread you think it is, and what is I can't even, I'm on welfare and I know how hard it is for people that need it and how easily people can defraud it. So I can't even imagine. But what do you think the number is?
So when this whole thing started, it was Feeding Our Future. And they said $250 million. Oh, that's a bad. I said $250 million. That's loose change in the couch.
Oh my gosh, million. Yes, that is a low ball number.
So I started telling the U.S. attorney that this thing is north of $30 billion, 30. And so then he held a press conference and he said, oh, it's $1 billion in fraud. Then he came out again and he said, well, 18 billion, and we think half of it is fraud. I said, you've got to keep going. It's going to end up. My thought is that when you add in all the state, federal, county, city money, grant money, all this NGO money, it's going to approach $80 billion in Minnesota alone. Across the country, it's got to be $600 billion or more in the U.S.
That's crazy. So what is life been like for you since you exposed this?
It's interesting you ask, because when I got into this, I just wanted to be David. I didn't want my identity known. That's why in the videos, Nick says, I met with the Minneapolis man, David. And what happened was a local reporter here figured out who I was. And she showed up at my house on New Year's Day. And then she wrote this. It was supposed to be a hit piece in the Minneapolis Star Tribune. And it actually was a very good piece for me. And so once I was outed in that way, I decided I needed visibility because I needed to become high profile. Only because my thought would be that if somebody wants to do something harmful to me, they're going to think twice, because if something happens to me at this point now, it's going to be national news. And I think the response from people is going to be pretty angry. They're going to be pretty mad that something happened to me. So I have to live life differently. I have to know who's around me at all times within a 3-foot radius, because if the arm is typically 3 feet long, if somebody has a knife and they want to do something to me, I can't shake hands with anybody I don't know. And the security we had said, keep your eyes on their hands. And when I go out, I typically wear a hat and glasses, sunglasses, and some sort of disguise, because people have started to recognize who I am. And so it's a different world. And I thought if they were going to do something, would have done it by now. But I'm still leery.
That is unbelievable. Do you have kids? Do you mind me asking?
Yeah, I have 3 kids.
How old are they?
Let's see, 34, 32, and 30.
Okay, so they're at least grown, but that's horrible for your family to have to live with. People in their fraudulent Medicaid, they will do anything to keep the fraudulent Medicaid, but they don't seem to care about the people that need it very much.
And what's really shameful, Devin, is that people get up and go to work every day for 30, 40, 50 years. And they're good people, they're honest people, they're hardworking, they contribute to society. And they're never going to see $1 million or $2 million in their entire life. These guys make that in one day and they're not doing anything except fraud.
I know. They were making I thought it was a year. They're making $1 million a day, some of these people.
Yes.
And meanwhile, for the people that need it, there's a marriage penalty and an asset limit. And these people are making $1 million a day. It's so unbelievable. I can't even wrap my head around it.
We're at a point in our nation's history where, and the only other time I can think of that is similar to what we're going through now was the Civil War. The Civil War was one group wanted slavery, the other group said no. And so that was the genesis of the Civil War. And of course, the no slave people prevailed. And I see that right now that we are dealing with evil like I've never seen before. And we're at a fork in the road, and people have to decide, look, are you with me? Do you want to stop this? Do you want to get us back to being who we were? Or do you want to continue down this road? Because if we go down this road, it is the destruction of our country. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm saying this is what is going to happen throughout the country. And we're going to get to a point where we can't recover. We can't get back to who we were.
Oh yeah, Medicaid fraud is destroying the country right now because people know that they can collect and they're eventually going to do it, and then the whole economy is going to collapse and that'll be it.
So I do believe that if we allow this to continue, it's only going to get larger and it's going to put us further in debt. And what kind of a world are we leaving the next generation and their kids and their kids and their kids and their kids? If we put them so far in debt, they can never, ever recover. So what ends up happening is you end up becoming a socialist or a communist country because the government steps in and then they control everything. And what's truly disgusting about the fraud is who it hurts. It hurts kids with cancer. It hurts the disabled. It hurts the blind. It hurts veterans. It hurts the homeless. It hurts those people who get up and go to work every day. It hurts everybody. And I just want to stop. Look, I don't want fame. I don't want fortune. I'm not making a penny off this. I'm doing it because somebody had to do it. I'm the guy, and I'm gonna tear this whole thing down, and I'm gonna make it right.
And just so you know, just so everybody knows, I have not paid you to be on here. I do not make a penny off of this podcast. As of yet, I hope to one day, but I do not make a penny off of this podcast. So I'm just doing this because I'm just appalled by this fraud and it hurts people like me. Meanwhile, these people are getting $1 million a day off it.
And what's sad is they don't care that they're hurting you or that they're hurting anybody else. They don't care. And that's why trying to go in there and reason with them is not going to work. We have to cut off the funding source. And then all this fraud starts to go away because if you're not giving them the money, they can't commit the fraud. There is no fraud. There are no money wires. There's no bags of cash at the airport. It all stops if you cut off the funding. And so you say, that's terrible to cut off the funding of all the child care. It is, but we're at war right now with this evil. And there are going to be some casualties. But my thought is, look, if you're a legitimate child care or a legitimate daycare or a legitimate home health care company, you can prove you're legitimate. And then the funding will restart. It's the ones who are fraudulent that can't prove they're real that have to go.
Yes. And I know this for a fact because I'm at my parents' house recording this, but I have an apartment in Norfolk through this place called Hope House Foundation, doing God's work every day, doing God's work, letting people with disabilities and the elderly live in the community instead of nursing homes. And they have papers and stuff they have to do and notes the staff has to take and everything. So there is a paper trail, and the ones that we will have a lot of paper. The ones that aren't have no paper. It's just that simple.
And what has always struck me at this point now is that I'm out there in the public stating that these childcare facilities, these autism centers, these transportation companies, they're all fraudulent. If I had a business and somebody was out there saying in public that my company is fraudulent and it's not, I'm going to sue that person for damages because they've damaged my business and what they're saying is untrue. To this point, I've never gotten a cease and desist letter from any of these childcare or these autism centers. I haven't gotten a lawsuit, and I'm waiting for them to sue me, because if they do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to file a countersuit against them, and I'm going to include the state of Minnesota Department of Human Services as a defendant in my countersuit. Then I get all the paperwork, all the billing, and I get the exterior camera footage from the childcare facility showing that there were no kids at their facility.
That would be amazing. So somebody, I never thought I'd say this, but somebody please do this, man, so we could finally see all the records. Gosh. So tell us about, I was watching a Fox News interview you did with Kaylee. Tell us about the Hmong people, and they didn't want to do it, and then so they bought the small. Tell us how the playbook works, how you think the government did this.
The Democrats back in the 70s, maybe the late 70s, they started to look at how can we secure a solid voting block that we can count on. We know basically 100% of these people are going to vote for us. So they looked at what was going on in Southeast Asia, the Cambodians, the Vietnamese, the Hmong, and they decided to bring the Hmong over. And once they had a significant number of Hmong here, they went to them and said, okay, we think we have this program, you don't have to work and you can. Well, I got to know the de facto head of the Hmong community here in the Twin Cities. His name is Dao Yang. He passed away last year. And I went over to dinner at his house years ago, and we're sitting there, and up on his mantle, he's got a picture with Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan and Henry Kissinger and the president of France, and all these people. And I looked at him.
That is amazing.
I said, wow, you're a man. And he goes, and he's the one who told me about how the Democrats wanted them to partake in this fraud. And he said, absolutely not, because it's dishonorable and it disgraces the community. And so, yeah, you're going to have some Hmong that probably got involved in fraud early on. But the credo when they came over was, you're going to work, you're here in the greatest country in the world, you got to be thankful every day, and you have to contribute to society. So the Democrats looked and they said, that backfired on us. And so they had to find another group. So they looked around the world for some unstable country. They settled on Somalia. And then when the civil war started in 1991 in Somalia, that's when they said, oh, we can see all these people are fleeing conflict and we're going to bring them over. And that's what they did. They started bringing them over by the thousands. And then once they were here, the Somalis fit right into the fraud framework that the Democrats had set up. And then once the Somalis said, oh, this works, they just expanded it, and it's just grew and grew into this massive multi-billion-dollar fraud. And politicians knew what was going on. The Department of Human Services certainly knew what was going on. If I can find the fraud in 5 minutes, and you're writing a check to somebody for $500,000 or $1 million, $10 million, you're not
Can't even spell learning center, and they claim to be an early childhood education.
Yes.
To quote our great vice president, perhaps if you can't spell learning correctly, you shouldn't be an early childhood education.
And so the way I laid this out was I had all this data amassed, and I said, well, I can't go to the local media here, and I'm a nobody on the internet, so I'm not an influencer by any means. And so I looked around at all these different influencers on the internet, and when I saw Nick Shirley, I said, that's my guy.
What is it about Nick?
So Nick, what I noticed is he's very calm, and he stays on topic. So when people are screaming at him and yelling at him, he just keeps asking the question, where are the children? And it was his demeanor that he was so calm and so focused. I knew he would be a perfect fit for this. And I had to message him like 10 times. And he finally called me Friday night about 9:30, December 12th of this past December. I said, well, you're coming to Minnesota. We're going to make 2 videos. The first one's going to be childcare, and then we're going to do the transportation. And he goes, we can do the childcare and then we'll talk about it. It's going to be the biggest video you'll ever make.
Yeah, that's probably an understatement.
Yeah. So when he came here, I had it all mapped out where we were going to go. And it wasn't because I'd been in these facilities. I was trying to, but there were so many of them that I said, well, we don't have to travel very far and we can cover a lot of them. And then I said, we got to go to the Quality Living Center. And that ended up becoming like the biggest word in the industry because they're selling these shirts all over the world, the sweatshirts all over the world. And that's okay. I don't mind that people copy it. I'm just happy to get the word out there. But it exposes just how bad it is because nobody from the Department of Human Services ever told them to correct their sign. How is that even possible?
I don't want a business that gets Medicaid funding. I get it personally, but if I did something that egregious, they would probably be like, if Virginia is a very generous state, they would probably be like, you need to correct that. Otherwise, we're going to have some issues.
Yeah. That's why I say the fraud is so massive here. And this whole scheme started here in Minneapolis. And once they had the framework set up, they tested it out here to see what they could get away with. And they said, well, that was easy, let's add something else. That was easy, let's add something else. And that's why I said in the second video that transportation is the hub of the wheel, and all these things are spokes. Childcare, adult daycare, home health care, they're all spokes of the wheel, but it all revolves around transportation because they could say we had to bring the person here, and none of it's true. It's all fraud. And so then when we went in the second video, we went to transportation companies. I had never been to these addresses. I wanted to go in cold so that Nick and I were seeing them for the first time. And none of them exist. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, what cracked me up was in the second video, you went to the transportation company, and I said this in my reaction video that I posted on YouTube. You went to a transportation, and it was a liquor store.
And what's funny is the Muslims don't drink. So
Oh my God, I didn't even know that.
And if you look at the video, all the shelves are full. Not one bottle has been touched because they don't drink. So why? But they want to own that whole neighborhood. And now a guy who's running for the Minnesota Senate has said that publicly that he wants to declare that area of Minneapolis a no-go zone for white people.
That is crazy.
It's crazy, yeah. Lundy, Jamal Lundy.
That's crazy. What do you think should happen to Tim?
After our first video, Tim Walz announced he would not be seeking re-election. And
thank you for ending Tim Walz. Thank you.
Yeah. So I walked into his office about a year and a half ago, and he has a staff member at the front desk and there's a security guard over there. And I walked in and I said, hey, how you doing? And I said, would you let Governor Walz know that a guy walked into his office today and said that he's going to be resigning before the end of his term? Okay, thanks. Have a good day. And I walked out. And the guy was just like, what is that, right?
Drop the bike, walk out.
So eventually I pressured Governor Walz enough to where he had to admit that he knew about the fraud as early as 2020. And I said, well, that's a problem because there's a law in Minnesota that if you are head of an agency and your agency can be reviewed by the legislative auditor and the governor's offices can be reviewed by the legislative auditor, if you're aware of fraud or suspected fraud, you must report it to the legislative auditor immediately. And then the legislative auditor decides whether to bring in the FBI, the Treasury, the IRS. They make that determination. Governor Walz said he contacted the FBI. He didn't. I talked to the FBI. The guy's a liar. He's a pathological liar. And so he had to admit they knew about fraud. But then when our video came out, I think the pressure from the Democrats was so great. They said, we're not going to seek re-election. I said, I know what they're going to do. They're going to bring Klobuchar over here because her dad was a big columnist and TV guy here in the city. So she's going to be the next governor, Klobuchar is. But I wonder what they're going to do with that Senate seat, with her Senate seat. Who's going to get that? But when you look at Minneapolis and all these people, all these key people are not from Jacob Fry, Minneapolis mayor, is from Virginia. Ellison's from Detroit. Governor Walz is from Nebraska. St. Paul Mayor Herr is from Laos, and then she moved somewhere else in the U.S. Police Chief O'Hara of Minneapolis, he's from New Jersey. His wife's a Muslim cop in New Jersey, but you say, well, big deal. Why are they here? What are they doing here? That's what I mean, they can be here, but why are they here? Why are all the top people in the Twin Cities not from Minnesota? It doesn't make sense.
That's crazy, yeah. So you will be testifying before the Senate next week, which is crazy. What do you hope to bring up in the Senate?
So yeah, it was the Senate testimony was originally scheduled for this Wednesday, the 28th, and then it was rescheduled to the 4th because of the storms that are happening out east. And so I'll be testifying on the 4th, and I'm going to talk about the genesis of the fraud and the fact that if you have a child care facility in Minnesota, there are specific regulations governing toddlers or preschool. You have to have X number of staff for each group of children. My take on that was, look, you come in and you get the tax records for these child care facilities because they're going to have to show. They have to have, if they have 99 children, they have to have a minimum of 8 employees, minimum. And so you say, okay, we've got the income for the facility, then you've got 8 W-2s, right? Because they have to be W-2 employees to work at that facility. And then you're going to have 8 I-9s, which prove their citizenship. Can they even work there? And so that's why I'm hoping I get sued so I can bring all this to light, and it will, if they sue me, I will immediately file a countersuit within a day. And then they can't get out of it. And I'm not going to want money from them. I just want the truth to come out so people can see what's going on. And the problem in Minnesota is people are Minnesota nice. Yeah, but Minnesota nice, when is it crossover to being Minnesota stupid? You have to wake up and say, and so I've alienated family members and friends and all that. And I said, look, I'm coming down the tracks and you're either with me or you're not, but I'm coming through. So you have to decide because I got that plow on the front. And you're either going this way or you're going that way.
Yeah, that's crazy. All we're saying is that fraud is bad. That should not be a controversy.
I tried to point out that fraud is going to be evident in every ethnic group, every community. It's a fact of life. And what's funny is in the second video that one guy came out who was ranting at Nick and me for the transportation companies. And he said, we're not the only community that commits fraud. I thought he just admitted on camera that they commit fraud. And he's accurate, but the fraud in the Somali community was so overwhelming. It was just this massive entity. It dwarfed anything else. If you took all the other ethnic groups together and combined their fraud, they're just a tiny dot compared to this Somali fraud.
Why do you think the Somalis are so much greater than all the other ethnic groups?
I think because, again, they were the group that was chosen to fit that fraud framework. So you don't have the Italians or the Irish or the Germans or the Russians or anything like that. They didn't fit in this framework. And when you look at the Somalis in Minnesota, so you come from a place that's 100 degrees a day over there, 100, whatever it is, and you're coming someplace that goes 20 below. Why? Why are they in Minnesota? Of all the places, why aren't they in Arizona or Texas or Florida? Why are they here in Minnesota? Why are all the elected officials not from Minnesota? You see how it all, when you stand back and you look at it from a bird's eye view, you say, this whole thing doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit logically. And if it doesn't fit logically, there's something wrong with it.
Yeah. Anything that you would like to add before we get off here?
Look, I believe that we can return America to its greatness. And what I mean by that is hard work, honesty, taking care of others, accepting and embracing the American culture instead of coming over here and saying my way or the highway. Well, look, you're in the United States. You're not in Somalia. You're not anywhere else. Be grateful you're here, and you have to assimilate into society. You have to go get a job. You have to contribute. They don't contribute any. Very few of them work, and they have stolen billions and billions of dollars, and it's funding terrorism and all sorts of things. So I just want it to stop.
And I'll add that America has the potential to have the greatest welfare program that the world has ever seen that helps the people it needs to help without outdated laws and all this stuff. And if you want to see exactly what we're fighting for, you can go to wheelwithit.com/reform or welfarereformnow.com. It'll take you to the same place. But we need to cut out the fraud so that doing the overhaul doesn't bankrupt the nation, because that's not a place we want to be either.
And so we have to recognize the fraud, what it is, how it's being committed. And what I'd really like to see is the federal government come into Minnesota Department of Human Services to send a message to all the social service agencies around the country and say, look, if you write a check to a fraudulent business, you run the risk of federal prosecution because that's federal money that's going into those payments. And you better make sure that the check you're writing is going to a legitimate business or you run the risk of going to prison. That's what they have to do. And this fraud will stop immediately.
Do you think they're going to do that? I know JD went down there. Did you get a chance to meet JD when he was down there?
I did not, no.
Have you met Trump yet?
No, but that's upcoming.
Oh my gosh, when are you gonna meet Trump? That's so exciting.
I'll let you know. I don't have it. I have a preliminary invitation right now, and I'll let you know, because when you're invited, they send you out, like when I testified before the Senate, they send you out a formal letter on letterhead. And so when I get that, I'll let you know so you can make the announcement.
That is amazing.
It's going to be big.
Yes, maybe you should film another video and bring Nick along with you and film another video and put it up.
We're talking about it right now, so.
That would be amazing. Please, if you would, pass along the websites for me.
Yeah, it's going to be all nickshirley.com, but I'll give you a heads up if we're going to film. And then if we have completed filming, I'll let you know. And then Nick does the editing, so it'll probably be 3 days, 4 days before he actually puts it together. He does such a good job with editing these videos.
Yes, like his edits are amazing.
Yeah, he's got a very good setup that he works with, a really good equipment, which I don't have. So he does editing, but I talk with him when we walk through it.
I don't have that either.
Yeah.
But best of luck to you. You are, sir, are an American hero. And where can people follow you on social media?
I don't really have much for social media, but I have a TikTok account, which is it's called The Other Guy. Because in the videos, I was the other guy. The other guy.
That's amazing. Okay, yeah, that's amazing. I have so enjoyed talking to you. Please keep me updated. Please say hi to everybody you meet for me in Washington. I will be down there soon, probably, with Hope House. And thank you so much for being on here today.
I'll do what I can to help, Devin.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to follow the show and our guests on social media and subscribe. Be sure to hit the bell so you'll get notified when we upload new episodes. See you next time.